The Walking Dead Analyzed, Episode 801, Mercy. The Walking Dead is no stranger to jumping around during different timelines. Season 2 used the structure of past versus present to unravel a dark truth about Shane and Otis. In Season 5, it used it a little in an artistic way for Ty's death. In Season 6, it used it to condense the story and control the focus, like in both the premiere and in the finale. Season 7 also used it to regain structure and the momentum they lost from the Season 6 cliffhanger. However, Season 8 Episode 1 takes it farther than any episode before it. We open with 6 minutes and 45 seconds jumping between 5 different timeline events. Number 1, the end of Season 7. Now this combines multiple days scavenging and preparing to build an armored vehicle mobile wall, essentially. It's also used contacting Dwight and receiving lookout locations and battlefield plans. They even start taking out the lookouts around this time. And number 2, meeting at the hilltop right before attacking Negan. Number 3, attacking Negan at the Sanctuary. Number 4, flash forward sometime after attacking the Sanctuary. This is also sad future Rick. And number 5, the flash forward 3 to 5 years into the future with a happy Rick. Or it's a dream. Now, meeting at the hilltop and attacking Negan are likely in the same day, as well as taking out the lookouts, so it's easier to look at these events in 3 distinct timelines. Number 1 is the end of Season 7, preparing for war and attacking Negan. Number 2 is the future sad Rick, well after attacking Negan, either a few hours or a few days or a few weeks. Number 3 is the flash forward, clearly a few years after attacking Negan. The very first image of this season is important. We see Rick's closed eyes, looking tired, weak, almost as if he's just about to wake up, and just before his eyes open, it cuts to a cane, then purple flowers, and then to a clock. And it goes on until Rick is at Glenn and Abe's gravesite, and this intro covers the prep work as well as starts with Rick's speech. And by the end of the 6 minutes, we see Rick again back at the gravesite, and the following images are identical repeats. The cane, the flowers, and a new profile shot. And then the future happy Rick opens his eyes. Next, a future sad Rick opens his eyes, and the theme song plays, taking us into the bulk of the story in this episode. A story heavy with the themes of hope not being enough, seen when Carl wants to help a hungry traveler, and Rick chases him off with the hope that he makes it. The theme of revenge and community. Father Gabriel pulling Rick out of his revenge-seeking trance and going back to the plan to take out the outposts for the good of the community's survival. And the theme of oppression, with Rick's speech bookending this episode. The first part addresses having to take a stand against a tyrant. At the end of this episode, Rick's speech touches even more on fighting oppression, saying, "If we start tomorrow, right now, we have already won." Tomorrow represents being free, fighting oppression today. Before you won physically, you have already won. Negan can never again oppress this group of people if they never again give in to his ways. So if you live tomorrow as a free man, as if you've already defeated and won against Negan, be your tomorrow self right now, and you've already won before we even go into battle. The symbolism throughout this episode was also pretty fantastic, kicking it off with the purple flowers, which mean royalty, dignity, pride, and success. The clock with the dials at 8 and 4 could mean something big is going to come up in episode 4 of Season 8, or with Season 8 there is a 4-year time skip, since a clock does represent time. Dwight standing next to a walker with half a face, just after sending a message to Negan's enemy. What would Negan do to Dwight if he was caught? He'd rip his face off. So right there is symbolism for what Dwight's future might be if he fails. He'll end up on the wall as a walker with half of his burnt face ripped off. Carol looks at a flower, which touches on her failure to escape situations where she must kill, even when it's not fun, something she admits to Daryl later in this episode. Rick kisses Judith goodbye with 101 in the background, which could pay respects to episode 1, which is officially numbered as 101, or it could be connected to the comic book. In issue 101, Alexandria is attacked by the Saviors, which was not put in the show at that time. So Rick kissing Judith goodbye in front of 101 could be foreshadowing her death in a future attack at Alexandria during this war. Comic moments throughout this episode were also a treat for comic fans. "It's your show" was a line from Andrea, Rick's girlfriend in the comic. On the show, it's Michonne. Calling for Negan, Gregory's betrayal, the Walker Army, and more are all little pieces that are straight from the comic. Skybound always puts together great side-by-side comic versus show images of every line and every scene. There's going to be a link in the video description to check out all those images. Michonne mentioning a festival. In the comic, there is a time skip, and Rick looks identical to how he does on the TV show during that time skip. Cane and all, and there's a big fair where all the communities are involved. The callbacks in episode 100 were also exciting. Rick telling Negan this is the only way, and then saying "you're gonna make me count" to Negan in such a cocky and wonderful way calls back to season 7 episode 1 when Negan said that to Rick about cutting Carl's arm off. The orange backpack is great. We first see this backpack when Rick, much like the hungry traveler, refused to help the hitchhiker, and later they find his dead and torn apart body back in season 3, and it was Carl in the back seat who opens the door and picks up the backpack. And in this episode, Carl uses that backpack to feed the hungry traveler. The Polaroid camera. Negan and the Saviors took images of their victims, and Rick is now doing the same against Negan. I'm hoping he continues this of the defeated outposts and makes his own wall. Check out a video I made for a connection to the possible ending to the Season 8 finale with the Polaroid camera. Link in the description down below. In episode 1, there was a panning aerial shot for Rick being trapped in the tank. Glenn ends up saving him. And now in episode 100, they do that for Father Gabriel and Negan, the guy who killed Glenn. The metal around the RV was realistic, but also a nice callback to the wolves, who ruined Rick's plans by shooting the RV and it wouldn't run anymore. And last but not least, episode 1, waking up from the coma. In episode 100, he's waking up in the flash forward in this new world that they have built after the war. Easter eggs are always a pleasure to look for. Joe Giles, the bus walker, and he also was in a walker in season 2 of Fear the Walking Dead. And he came back in this episode to feast on some Savior flesh. And now my all-time favorite in this episode, after a fully reenacted scene that mirrors Rick from episode 1, now with Carl in episode 100, they both get gas, they both touch their side, they both look under a car, except one finds death and the other finds life. I also broke this down in a separate video, link will be in the description. Now Rick shows up, chases off the hungry traveler, and he spots a full-grown teddy bear girl walker with the same face damage as the little very first walker we ever see in the whole series of The Walking Dead back in episode 1. And they brought back the same actress that played the little teddy bear girl walker, now grown up, Addie Miller, coming back to do her own little Easter egg cameo. Carol and Daryl get their religious Easter egg, both present during both missions. And in the flash forward, the cat that Rick took from the heap can be seen across the table from Michonne. And then Shane's fan favorite meme is used by Negan. Now there are some complex scenes and mysteries in this episode, like Rick looking out into the distance at the hilltop. And then later on, when he kills the Savior in the overgrowth and lets the walker eat him, Rick looks at what appears to be the same hill. It matches almost perfectly, except for this time he sees a reflection, like someone holds up a mirror against the sun. I am presuming that this is Daryl calling him over, letting him know that he killed the lookout on that side of the hill. In other words, giving him the all-clear signal. Which I love this because in season 6 they underestimated Negan and they were repeatedly ambushed along the way. These scenes don't just call back to season 6. They show Rick's growth as a leader and they show the audience finally how the Saviors knew their whereabouts when leaving Alexandria to take Maggie to the hilltop. Another part, sad Rick's eyes, looking similar to Rick from season 7 after leaving Glenn and Abraham's murder site. There's a stained glass panel seemingly hanging from a tree, and Rick is either heartbroken, tired, worn out, or all of the above. It's clearly in the future, but it's unknown if it's the same day as the Savior attack, or is it days later. Also, his finger or thumb can be seen as if he's holding a book or a knife or something. Without having all the pieces, all we know for sure is that we are seeing, through his eyes, the good and the bad of war. The bad is shown through the eyes of sad Rick, is likely a death or a few deaths that hit him hard. The good is the flash-forward eyes to the happy Rick in a growing community, having a festival. Rick saying, "My mercy prevails over my wrath," also said by the Hungry Traveler. Since we see Rick almost giving into his wrath once in this episode, it makes us wonder if he's going to go down that path again, except not be stopped this time, and getting one of his closest friends killed because of it. If the hallucination is not real, does that mean that Judith will die? It'll be difficult for a child actor's real-life growth to not mess with the continuity on screen. Plus, Carl said that Judith picked out the odd and jarring song by Weird Al Yankovic, a cover to Another One Bites the Dust. And when speaking of the Big Owl, which is a callback to Season 5, Jesse had an owl sculpture that was unknowingly destroyed by Sam, and Rick told Jesse about the broken window theory. Keeping the windows intact, you keep society intact, and then Negan later shoots out a window at Alexandria. But speaking of the owl, Michonne says something weird, saying, "They are going to get you." It's one owl, she says they are. It kind of reminded me of when Sammy got eaten by the walkers and he heard Carol saying they will get you. These are some interesting connections that some fans could make. I know I did. Now, other than the difficult timeline, the story of this episode is actually pretty simple. The survivors plan for war. Dwight's inside information lets them know how much time they have, and Negan's lookouts will warn him if an attack is coming. So Negan plans. He doesn't rush. And he even says so later on, saying he was in a meeting. And the survivors get ready by armoring their vehicles for possibly multiple assaults, one at the sanctuary and another at an outpost. And Team Carol guides a herd of walkers and prepares for an ambush on the Saviors. And they meet at the hilltop to organize. Using Dwight's list, they kill the lookouts, one in a tree stand, one in a nearby neighborhood, one in Pay's Industrial, and one in an open field. Blowing up a car sends a signal to get things going and draws out Saviors to an ambush, as well as more explosions later on by Daryl on the bike to keep the herd moving, and also to show Rick smoke in the air so they can time their assault. And I know a sniper could most likely take Negan out, but the showrunner Scott Gimple said that Rick wanted his lieutenants to surrender, and he wants to work with them after Negan's gone. Once it's time, the gunfire starts, and since Dwight's among the enemies, they can't easily just shoot at them without risking hitting him, so they put their aim on scaring them inside, and then they put their aim on the windows to keep the Saviors from mounting a counterattack and firing back down on them. This way they can hit the car horns and draw the walkers into the final area, and the RV is used to blow an opening in the fence and let the walkers surround the factory. And once the walkers are close, the survivors retreat, and Father Gabriel, trying to help Gregory, reveals why they were shooting out the windows. Now he's stuck because of the returning gunfire. And with the lookouts done and the sanctuary out of the fight and cut off from the other outposts, the survivors regroup and go on to the next stage, attacking the outposts. Morgan, Jesus, Tara, and crew are back at the satellite outpost from Season 6. Their story continues in 802. Daryl and Rick take out a guard and they enter a gated area, presumably another outpost. Their story will continue in 802. And King Ezekiel and Queen Carol and Kingdom Group go to Pay's Industrial, where a savior surprises them and blows up a door that was holding back a bunch of walkers, from the sound of it, and their story will continue in 802. Finally, Father Gabriel is trapped with Negan, and their story will continue on, if not 802, some other episode. And we will continue our thoughts for episode 802 in the next Walking Dead Analyzed.